Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is February 2nd, 2026. And if you've been keeping your ear to the ground, or I guess your earbuds in, you probably know that we just passed a pretty significant anniversary in the audio world.
That's right. It has been exactly 1 year since Monica Lewinsky launched her podcast, Reclaiming with Monica Lewinsky, back in February of 2025.
And it really feels like that podcast was the final piece of a puzzle that's been, almost 30 years in the making?
At least, for the longest time, Monica Lewinsky wasn't a person's name. It was a punchline.
It was. It was cultural shorthand for scandal, for a certain kind of joke on late-night TV.
But if you look at where she is now, today, it's a completely different reality. She's a producer, an activist, a media creator with, real institutional backing.
It's a full 180. She's no longer a historical footnote that you read about in a chapter on the Clinton presidency. She's a current active media figure with genuine clout.
She is. But the thing with these redemption arcs, the danger is that we tend to fast forward through the really messy parts. We see the before, which was the scandal, and we see the after, which is today, and we kind of just skip over the decades of pure survival in between.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are not here to just rehash the 1998 scandal for the gossip of it all. We've got a massive stack of source material here.
We really do. We have biographical records, the actual legal filings from the Starr investigation, which are just fascinating to read.
Unbelievable. We have details on her so-called wilderness years in London, which people rarely talk about. And we've mapped out the very strategic roadmap of her public reemergence.
We really want to study the mechanics of survival. How does a person reclaim their own narrative after the entire globe has decided on one for you? A single story that defines you.
And beyond that, how has our own collective definition of things like scandal and victimhood shifted? I mean, the lens we'd use in the late 90s versus the one we use now in the post-#MeToo era, they're just worlds apart.
It's a study of her, but it's also a study of us, how we shame people, how that's evolved.
It's fascinating. So let's rewind the tape. Way, way back.
Yeah.
Because before the blue dress, before the beret, before the Oval Office, she was just a person. Who was Monica Lewinsky before the world decided who she was?
Well, if we look at the biographical data, the first thing that just jumps out at you is the environment. She was born in San Francisco in 1973, but she is a creature of affluent Los Angeles.
So we're talking about.
We're talking Brentwood, Beverly Hills. This is high society, top tier LA life.
Okay, so wealthy, probably very connected, and I imagine maybe a bit sheltered from the real world.
Very much so. Her father, Bernard Lewinsky, was a prominent oncologist. His backstory is actually quite intense. He was the son of German Jewish refugees who escaped the Nazis.
What?
Yeah, they fled to El Salvador first and then eventually made it to the U.S. So there is this, this thread of deep survival and resilience in her DNA generations back.
That's a heavy legacy to carry. And her mother, what was her story?
Her mother was Marcy Lewis, and she was an author. Now, this is one of those details from the source material that feels almost too written to be true,
I think I know what you're talking about.
Her mother wrote a book called The Private Lives of the Three Tenors.
Wait, like the opera singers? Pavarotti and company?
The very same.
Yeah.
And it was described explicitly in reviews as a gossip biography.
Yeah.
It was meant to be sensational.
That is, you cannot make this up. It's undeniably ironic. Her mother literally made a living writing gossipy books about famous, powerful men.
And then her daughter becomes the subject of the biggest gossip story of the century, involving the most powerful man in the world.
It's unbelievable. It definitely adds a really complex layer to that whole family dynamic.
It really does. But on paper, Monica's path was the classic LA trajectory for someone from that background. She went to the John Thomas Dye School, which is a very exclusive prep school, then Beverly Hills High, and she graduated from another private school, Bel Air Prep, in 1991.
So a very polished, privileged education.
Absolutely. But beneath that shiny surface, there was a lot of turbulence. Her parents divorced in 1988, and by all accounts, it was a really messy, contentious, drawn-out split that was very hard on the children.
Right, so you have this young woman, product of a broken home, even if it's a wealthy one, growing up in a culture that is just completely obsessed with image and celebrity.
Precisely. And in our research stack, there's a specific relationship that happens before she ever sets foot in D.C. that I think is the real key. It's the Rosetta Stone to understanding what happens later.
You're talking about the Andy Blyler affair.
I'm so glad you pulled that out because it is so often glossed over or just mentioned as a footnote. But it's critical. This started back in 1992. Monica's attending Santa Monica College, and she's also working in the drama department at her old high school, Beverly Hills High.
And she enters into a 5-year relationship with Andy Blyler.
Hmm.
But let's be very clear about who he was.
Right. For context, Blyler was not a classmate. He wasn't a peer. He was her former high school drama instructor, who was married, and he was significantly older than she was.
Okay, let's just pause on this for a second. We have an older man, an authority figure, a teacher, engaging in a multi-year relationship with a former student who is just barely out of her teens.
Yes.
In 2026, we look at that and the alarm bells are just deafening. We have a vocabulary for that now. We call that grooming, or at the very least, a severe, unethical abuse of power dynamics.
Precisely. But in the early 90s, the lens was very, very different. To Monica, this was a secret romance, and it lasted for 5 years, even overlapping with her eventual move to Washington.
But the reason this is so significant for our deep dive isn't just the psychological setup, is it? It's what happens later. It's the betrayal.
It's the ultimate betrayal, because when the Clinton scandal breaks years later, Andy Blyler doesn't just, quietly disappear and hope no one finds out about his own affair.
He does the complete opposite.
The complete opposite. He goes to the press, and, more importantly, he goes directly to Kenneth Starr, the independent counsel investigating the president.
And what did he do? He didn't just talk, right?
No, he turned over physical items. Souvenirs, photographs, personal letters, documents that Monica had sent him over the 5 years of their relationship. He handed over her private, intimate correspondence to be used as evidence against her.
That is just brutal. I mean, think about that. The first major authority figure, romantic partner in her life, ends up selling her out, handing over evidence to help destroy her. It establishes this horrifying pattern.
What pattern is that?
That trust, for her, is something that gets weaponized against her. That her intimacy will be used as a public weapon.
It's a recurring theme, absolutely. The private becomes public ammunition. But okay, let's get her to D.C. She eventually transfers from Santa Monica to Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. She graduates with a psychology degree in 1995 and pretty quickly lands a major internship.
And not just any internship. This wasn't fetching coffee for some backbencher congressman. She gets into the White House, the West Wing, and the office of the Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta.
Which is the absolute nerve center of any administration. And she got the position, our sources say, through a family connection, which again speaks to that affluent, well-connected background we talked about.
But she must have been good at the job.
Oh, she clearly was capable, because by December of 1995, just a few months in, she moves from being an unpaid summer intern to a full-time paid position in the Office of Legislative Affairs.
And she's still only 22. She's inside the machine. And this, of course, brings us to the event horizon, the scandal. But I want to be really specific here because the popular memory is just this blurry montage of headlines and jokes. What does the actual record, the testimonies, say about the timeline of the affair itself?
It's surprisingly contained. According to the grand jury testimony from both of them, there were 9 specific sexual encounters.
Only 9. That's it. I feel like the cultural memory, the narrative that was built, assumes it was this daily, ongoing thing that lasted for years.
No, it was 9 specific encounters between November of 1995 and March of 1997. And the nature of these encounters is legally critical to everything that follows. Right.
The testimony stated they involved oral sex and other physical acts, but, and this is the legal firewall that was built, they did not include sexual intercourse.
Which, to a normal person, just sounds like a distinction without a difference. I mean, sex is sex. But in the very specific, high-stakes legal world that Clinton was operating in, that distinction was the entire ballgame.
It was the entire foundation of his defense. It was everything. But before we even get to the legal parsing of words, we have to look at the immediate workplace fallout. By April of 1996, Monica is transferred out of the White House.
Why? What was the official reason?
The official reason, according to her superiors, was that she was spending too much time around the president.
Which is the most polite, bureaucratic, HR speak way of saying, we see what's happening here and we need to separate them immediately.
Exactly. They see it as a potential problem. So they exile her to the Pentagon.
Exile is the right word? It is. She becomes an assistant to Kenneth Bacon, who was the chief Pentagon spokesman at the time. And for Monica, based on her own accounts, this was a devastation. She viewed it as being cut off from the man she thought she loved. She was isolated. And in that professional and emotional isolation, she found a friend. Or so she thought.
Linda Tripp.
Linda Tripp, a career civil servant much older, who presented herself as a sympathetic ear, a shoulder to cry on.
And in September of 1997, Lewinsky starts confiding in her. She's got to tell someone, right? She's carrying the biggest secret in the world.
She needs an outlet. She's overwhelmed. And this is where the betrayal that we saw with Andy Blyler repeats itself, but on just a nuclear scale.
Because Tripp isn't just listening sympathetically. She's not just being a friend.
She's producing, she's operating. She starts, without Monica's knowledge or consent, secretly recording their phone calls, hours and hours of them. She's taking detailed notes.
And who is she feeding this information to?
She's reporting the contents of these conversations to a woman named Lucianne Goldberg, a literary agent with deep ties to Clinton's political enemies. So we need to be clear. This was not just office gossip. This was a political intelligence gathering operation from the very beginning.
And the advice that Tripp gave Monica,
Yeah.
looking back on it, it's just chilling.
It's so calculated. She specifically advised Lewinsky to keep all the gifts the president had given her. Don't throw them out.
Evidence.
Right. And then famously, she told her not to dry clean the blue Gap dress that had been stained with semen during one of their encounters in the Oval Office.
It's pure manipulation.
Yeah.
Keep the evidence, dear. You might need it one day. It's so sinister.
It was a trap. A very carefully laid trap. And that trap was finally sprung by a completely separate legal case that, on the surface, had nothing to do with Monica Lewinsky.
The Paula Jones sexual harassment suit.
Exactly.
We have to connect these dots, because it's easy to get lost in the legal weeds here. Paula Jones was suing President Clinton for an incident of alleged sexual harassment that happened years before he was president, back when he was governor of Arkansas. So what on earth does that have to do with a White House intern?
Discovery. It's a phase in a lawsuit where both sides get to gather evidence. Jones's lawyers were trying to establish a pattern of behavior. They wanted to prove to a jury that Clinton had a habit of sexual misconduct with employees or subordinate women.
So they were looking for other women.
They cast a very wide net, asking for testimony from anyone who might have had a sexual relationship with him. And through the D.C. rumor mill, Lewinsky's name came up.
And when she's approached, initially, Monica tries to protect him.
She does. In January of 1998, she signs a sworn affidavit in the Paula Jones case, and in it, she denies under oath that she had a sexual relationship with the president.
And that is the moment the legal jeopardy becomes real for her. Because lying in the sworn affidavit isn't just a lie. It's the crime of perjury.
It's a felony. And at the exact same time this is happening, Kenneth Starr, the independent counsel who was appointed to investigate the Whitewater land deal, something totally unrelated from years ago, gets wind of the tapes from Linda Tripp.
The secret recording.
The secret recordings. And he immediately goes to the Attorney General, Janet Reno, and gets his investigative mandate expanded. He essentially says, forget Whitewater for a second. I'm now investigating whether the President of the United States and his friend Vernon Jordan encouraged this young woman to lie under oath.
So the investigation shifts from a decade-old, complicated real estate deal into a very current, very explosive investigation into perjury and obstruction of justice.
And that is what leads us to the semantics. The word games. And probably the most parsed, debated, and ridiculed sentence in modern American history.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
We really need to unpack the definition defense, because in Clinton's mind and in his lawyers' minds, this wasn't just a simple lie. It was a carefully constructed legal argument.
Okay, so lay it out for us. How on earth do you stand in front of the world and argue that what happened wasn't sexual relations?
It relied entirely on a very specific, very convoluted definition of sexual relations that had been provided by the prosecution and agreed to by the judge in the Paula Jones case. It wasn't the dictionary definition. It was a very particular legal one.
And what was it?
It was complex and multi-part. But Clinton's lawyers seized on one aspect of it. They argued that the definition required the person being accused to be the active participant, to be the one touching certain body parts of the other person, for the act to legally count as sexual relations under that specific paragraph of text.
So wait, his argument was, essentially, she performed acts on me, I was passive, therefore I did not technically engage in sexual relations under this very specific, agreed-upon definition.
That is exactly the argument. It was a hyper-technical, almost Talmudic reading of a legal document. He was answering the question according to a strict legal definition that he believed he hadn't violated, not according to common sense or what any normal person would think.
That is, I mean, the audacity of it is kind of breathtaking. It's the kind of argument that only a lawyer could come up with and think would actually work.
And it extended to his other denials, too. Remember the famous line from his grand jury testimony? It depends on what the meaning of the word is.
How could anyone forget? It became a punchline for years.
But there was a logic to it in his mind. He had said to his aides earlier there is not a sexual relationship, and he argued that was a truthful statement because the affair had ended months prior. So in the present tense he was arguing that at that moment there was no ongoing relationship.
It's maddening. It's like watching someone try to navigate a maze of their own creation. But while he was playing these word games, the physical evidence that Linda Tripp had coaxed Monica into preserving came back to end the entire debate.
The blue dress. The FBI's crime lab got a sample of Clinton's blood, they tested the stain on the dress, and the DNA match was irrefutable. It was a 1 in 7.87 trillion match.
That's conclusive.
It's about as conclusive as science gets. It forced a total pivot in the investigation. And to get Monica's side of the story without her facing prison, Kenneth Starr offered her transactional immunity.
Can you explain that term for us? Transactional immunity, what does that mean in practice?
Sure. It's basically the highest level of protection a witness can get. It's a legally binding agreement from the government that they will not prosecute you for any of the offenses related to the subject you're testifying about, provided you testify completely and truthfully.
So it protected her from being charged with perjury for that earlier false affidavit she signed.
Exactly. It was the only way to get her to talk without her facing serious jail time. It was her only way out.
So she testifies. The president testifies via closed-circuit television from the White House, but she has to do it in person in front of the grand jury. The Starr report comes out, full of excruciatingly personal details. The House impeaches him, the Senate acquits him. And for Bill Clinton, the crisis eventually ends. But for Monica Lewinsky, the trial is over, and the real punishment is just beginning.
Which brings us to the immediate aftermath. We're in 1999 now. The legal threat is technically gone, but she is, and this is without any exaggeration, the most famous woman in the world and possibly the most ridiculed and shamed person on the planet.
And she's broke. She has to survive. She has massive, crippling legal bills from a team of world-class attorneys. So she decides to do the only thing she can, tell her own story.
She cooperates with the biographer Andrew Morton, who famously wrote the Princess Diana book, for a biography called Monica's Story. And then on March 3rd, 1999, she sits for the big interview with Barbara Walters.
I looked up the numbers on this again because they're just staggering. That interview on 2020 drew 70 million American viewers.
Let's put that in perspective. That is more than most Super Bowls. It was a genuine monocultural event. Practically every household in America with a television was tuned in to watch this 25-year-old woman explain her sex life to the nation.
And the narrative at the time, the one pushed by the media, was that she was cashing in.
Oh, absolutely. The sources say she made about $500,000 for the book rights and another $1 million for the international rights to the Walters interview. So a total of about $1.5 million. And the public sentiment was very much, look at her, getting rich off her sin.
But the math on that narrative doesn't really hold up, does it? When you look at the reality of her situation.
Not at all. It falls apart immediately. Her legal defense team, people like Plato Kacharis and Jacob Stein, were among the best and most expensive in the world. She had round-the-clock security costs, she had basic living costs. That $1.5 million was consumed almost immediately by debt and expenses. She wasn't buying yachts, she was literally paying to stay out of prison.
And this financial pressure leads to what our outline calls the commercial venture era, or as I like to think of it, the handbag era. Because she couldn't get a normal job, could she?
No one would hire her. What would you put on your resume? She was completely radioactive to any mainstream employer, so she tried to lean into the only asset she had. Her fame, her notoriety. In September of 1999, she launches a company called The Real Monica, Inc.
And she literally starts designing and selling handbags.
She did. And according to the reports from the time, she took it quite seriously. These were described as hippie-ish reversible totes. She was personally flying down to Louisiana to supervise the manufacturing. She was trying to be a real entrepreneur.
And she had some success, right? I mean, these weren't just being sold out of the trunk of her car.
No, she got them into high-end boutiques. Henri Bendel in New York, Fred Segal in Los Angeles. She had an online store. She was making a real go of it.
It's almost heartbreaking when you think about it. It's like she saying to the world, if you're going to consume my life as a product, I might as well sell you a bag to carry it in.
It was a very public attempt at reclaiming her identity through commerce. But then came the Jenny Craig disaster in 2000, which was just a whole new level of public humiliation.
This one really makes me wince every time I read about it.
So Jenny Craig, the weight loss company, signs her to a $1 million endorsement deal. But the terms of the contract were just draconian.
What were they?
A huge chunk of that $1 million was contingent on her losing 40 pounds or more in a specific time frame. The payment was literally tied to her shrinking her body for them.
We will pay you, but only if you physically diminish yourself. The subtext is just screaming.
It's not even subtext. A spokesperson for the company actually went on the record and said she represents a busy, active woman, and she has had weight issues. That represents a lot of women in America. They were trying to pivot her political scandal into a relatable weight loss journey.
But the public, and more importantly, the company's own people, were not having it.
The franchisees revolted. The people who owned the individual Jenny Craig centers across the country basically said, absolutely not. We do not want this woman as the face of our brand. They were terrified it would alienate their core customer base.
So what happened to the campaign?
It was pulled almost immediately. The commercials barely aired. She only ever received $300,000 of the promised $1 million contract.
So it's just one rejection after another. She tries entrepreneurship, she tries endorsements, she even tries to lean into the absurdity of it all. She has a cameo on Saturday Night Live.
She does in May 1999. She appears in a couple of sketches basically lampooning her own situation.
She also had a stint as a TV personality, right?
A brief one. She was a correspondent for a UK channel in a segment called Monica's Postcards. And then in 2003, she hosts a reality dating show on Fox called Mr. Personality.
Oh, this one was something else. The premise was that the male contestants all wore masks to hide their faces.
The symbolism is just too much, isn't it? A woman who was judged almost entirely on her looks and her past is hosting a show where men have to hide their faces to be judged on their personality.
And how was it received?
It was panned. Critics absolutely destroyed it. It was seen as the height of trash television. And around the same time, in 2004, a major event happens that seems to be a real turning point for her. Bill Clinton releases his autobiography, My Life.
And for her, this was a massive blow, emotionally and psychologically.
It really was. She later said she felt he desecrated her character all over again. In the book, he maintained the narrative that he was passive in the affair, that he tried to stop it, that she was essentially the aggressor. He revised history in a way that protected himself and threw her under the bus one more time.
And what did she realize from that?
I think she realized that as long as she was in the United States, she would never be her own person. She would always just be a character in his story, a footnote in his biography.
So she does something incredibly radical. She just leaves. She disappears. And this begins what I think is the most fascinating and critically overlooked chapter of her entire life, the quiet years.
In 2005, she packs her bags and moves to London. And she doesn't go there to hide in a flat and lick her wounds. She applies to the London School of Economics, the LSE.
Which is not exactly a community college.
No. This is one of the most rigorous, elite academic institutions on the entire planet. And she gets in.
I just love this move. It's the ultimate clapback. The entire world calls you a bimbo and a ditz for a decade. So you go get a Master's of Science in Social Psychology from the London School of Economics.
She fully immersed herself in her studies. And if you really want to understand her mindset at the time, you have to look at her master's thesis. It is a brilliant and stunning piece of meta-analysis.
What was the title?
The title was In Search of the Impartial Juror, an exploration of the third-person effect and pre-trial publicity.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Let's break that down. The third-person effect. What does that mean in psychology?
The third-person effect is a well-established psychological theory. It posits that people tend to overestimate the influence of mass media messages on other people, while simultaneously underestimating the media's influence on themselves.
So it's basically the idea of, I'm a smart, independent thinker, and I'm not brainwashed by the news, but those people over there, they believe everything they see.
That is it exactly. So she was writing an academic paper about how the relentless, biased media coverage of her own case made it psychologically impossible for her to ever get a fair hearing in the court of public opinion. Everyone thought they knew the real story because they were immune to media influence, but in reality, they were all shaped by it.
She was using the tools of high-level academia to perform an autopsy on the mechanism of her own public trauma. That's incredible.
It's incredibly intellectual and, frankly, incredibly brave.
So she graduates in December 2006. She has the degree. She has the intelligence. She comes back to the States. Does the world finally let her move on and get a normal job?
Not a chance. This begins what she later called her lost decade. From roughly 2006 to 2014, she tries repeatedly to get normal jobs, corporate jobs, marketing, communications, working for nonprofits. Jobs she was perfectly, if not overqualified for, with her new degree.
And what would happen? How would the interviews go?
The interviews, by her account, would go great. They'd be impressed with her ideas. But then the hiring manager would have to go talk to the board or the PR department. And the answer that came back was always the same. We can't have Monica Lewinsky on the payroll. Think of the donors. Think of the press clippings. It's too much baggage.
That is a terrifying kind of purgatory. You've done the work, you've gotten the education, you've paid your dues 10 times over, but you are permanently branded. You're untouchable.
She was completely stuck. And I think that decade of stagnation, of being told no over and over again, is what finally pushed her to stop running from her past and instead turn around and confront it. If the world wouldn't let her be normal, then she had to become exceptional.
Which leads us directly to 2014, the reemergence.
The comeback. She writes a powerful, long-form essay for Vanity Fair magazine titled Shame and Survival. And she uses this one phrase in it that has always stuck with me. She said, "It was finally time to stick my head above the parapet."
That's a military term, right? Looking over the wall of a trench, knowing you're completely exposed, knowing you might get shot at.
It's the perfect metaphor. She knew the risks, but she decided it was time to take control of the narrative. And she made a crucial, brilliant, strategic pivot. She stopped talking about scandal and started talking about bullying and harassment.
And she gave herself a new title. She called herself Patient Zero.
Patient zero of losing your personal reputation on a global scale almost instantaneously. And she's right. If you think about it, the Drudge Report broke the story online. She was arguably the first private citizen to be globally, publicly shamed and humiliated via the internet. There was no playbook for it. No one had ever experienced that before.
And she connected her own experience to a more recent tragedy, the suicide of Tyler Clementi.
This was a catalyst for her activism. Tyler Clementi was a student at Rutgers University who died by suicide in 2010 after his roommate used a webcam to secretly film him being intimate with another man and then posted about it online. He was outed and cyberbullied.
And Monica saw a direct line from her experience to his.
She saw the lethal endpoint of what she had gone through. She realized that public shaming wasn't just a political game or a media circus. It had real, human, and sometimes fatal consequences.
It wasn't about Democrats and Republicans anymore. It was about survival.
And this reframing culminates in her TED Talk in March 2015. It was called The Price of Shame. It has been viewed millions and millions of times. In it, she called for a more compassionate internet. She became a strategic advisor for the anti-bullying organization Bystander Revolution. She transformed herself from a punchline into a protector.
But then, just as she's establishing this new identity, the culture shifts under her feet again. It's 2017, the Harvey Weinstein story breaks, the hashtag #MeToo movement goes viral.
And this was a really complicated moment for her, because for 2 decades, Monica had fiercely defended the idea that the affair with Clinton was consensual. She always insisted on her own agency in the situation.
Her line was always, "I made a choice. It was a mistake, but it was my choice."
Right. She rejected the victim label, but hashtag #MeToo introduced a whole new public vocabulary about power dynamics, about consent, about abuses of authority.
And it forced her to look at her own story through this new lens.
It did. In 2018, she wrote another powerful essay for Vanity Fair. And in it, she publicly reevaluated her own history. She looked at the massive power imbalance. He was the president of the United States, arguably the most powerful man on earth. He was 27 years older than her. He was, for all intents and purposes, her boss's boss's boss.
And she started asking the question, is true consent even possible in that kind of power vacuum?
And she concluded that it really wasn't. She wrote, and this is a direct quote, "I'm beginning to entertain the notion that in such a circumstance, the idea of consent might well be rendered moot." She called it a gross abuse of power.
She also revealed she'd been diagnosed with PTSD from the whole experience. Not from the affair itself, but from the public outing, the investigation, the global ostracism.
Which gave a clinical, medical framework to the suffering she'd endured. And with that new self-awareness came the setting of hard boundaries. She started saying no to a world that had consistently walked all over her. And the Town & Country incident really highlights this new strength.
Tell us about that.
In 2018, Town & Country magazine invited her to a major event celebrating philanthropy. She accepted the invitation. Then, a short time later, Bill Clinton also accepted an invitation to the very same event. And the magazine's response was to call Monica and rescind her invitation.
They uninvited her. They chose the powerful man over the woman he had abused his power with. Again, the pattern repeats.
But this time, Monica didn't just go away quietly. She went on Twitter and she called them out on it. She exposed the hypocrisy publicly. And then there was the even more public display of boundary setting at a conference in Jerusalem that same year.
With the journalist Yonit Levi.
Yonit Levi is a very prominent Israeli journalist. Before their onstage interview, Lewinsky's team had made it explicitly clear to the producers and to Levi. There's one question that is off limits. Do not ask her if she still expects a private, personal apology from Bill Clinton. That was the boundary.
And Levi asked it anyway. It was her very first question.
Her first question. And Monica didn't debate her. She didn't get flustered. She didn't awkwardly laugh it off. She just calmly and firmly said, "I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to do this." And she stood up, put the microphone down, and walked off the stage.
That is just a masterclass in self-respect and reclaiming your power in the moment.
It was the moment that the insecure 22-year-old girl in the beret finally left the building for good. She showed the world, and probably herself, that access to her story, to her pain, is a privilege, not a right.
And from that point on, we enter the current era, the era of Monica the producer. She's no longer just the subject of the story. She is the creator.
She executive produced a documentary for HBO Max called 15 Minutes of Shame, which is all about the culture of public shaming. But the really big one, the one that brought everything full circle, was American Crime Story, Impeachment.
The Ryan Murphy FX series.
She was a full producer on the show about her own life. She wasn't just a consultant, she had real input. She was in the writer's room, she gave notes on the scripts, she made sure that Linda Tripp wasn't portrayed as just some cartoon villain, but as a complex, wounded, and manipulative human being.
She ensured that the terrifying FBI interrogation scene, where they held her in a hotel room for 12 hours and threatened her with decades in prison, was portrayed accurately and with all its horror.
She forced the audience to sit in that room with her 22-year-old self and experience the trauma. And now she has her own production company. The name is just perfect. It's called Alt Ending Productions.
She is literally writing an alternative ending to her own story.
She also signed a first-look deal with 20th Television in 2021. This means a major studio is paying her to develop new projects. She has gone from unemployable to a power player in Hollywood.
Which brings us right back to where we started today. Her podcast, Reclaiming. It's been out for a year now. She's the one asking the questions. She's the one guiding the conversation.
She has successfully, against all odds, transitioned from being the object of the global conversation to being the subject of it. She is the one holding the microphone.
So as we wrap this deep dive up, let's go back to that central question we started with. What does the survival, and now the thriving, of Monica Lewinsky teach us?
I think it teaches us that the word scandal is often just a convenient, dismissive cover for a gross abuse of power. It teaches us that the court of public opinion is a kangaroo court, almost always. But mostly, I think it teaches us about the sheer, stubborn power of human resilience. She survived what she calls the house of gaslight.
And here is a thought I want to leave you, the listener, with. We often hear people say, thank God social media didn't exist back in 1998. It would have been so much worse for her.
I hear that all the time. It's the common wisdom. But I want to challenge that just for a minute.
How so?
If Twitter or Instagram or TikTok had existed in 1998, yes, the harassment and the trolling would have been louder, more vicious, more direct, no question. But Monica would have had a handle. She would have had a platform. She would have had a voice.
You wouldn't have been silenced.
Exactly. In 1998, she had to wait for Barbara Walters to give her permission to speak. She had to wait 16 years for a legacy magazine like Vanity Fair to give her the space to write her own story. If social media had existed, she could have posted a video explaining her side of the story on day one.
She could have fought back in real time. She could have countered the narrative as it was being built.
Right. The gatekeepers in the mainstream media controlled her image completely for more than a decade. Social media, for all of its undeniable toxicity, it destroys those gatekeepers. So it's possible, just possible, that instead of being a pariah for 20 years, the public might have rallied around her much sooner. She could have been a hero for speaking out, not a villain for existing.
That is a really fascinating what if. Would the whole slut versus predator narrative have survived if the so-called slut could tweet back? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is that today she has the mic. And she is clearly not giving it back.
A lesson for us all, I think.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.